and then as time goes by I build on it until I have a pretty clear picture in my mind of what I'm trying to accomplish. And if you're a new subscriber, and I suspect the people that have just signed up, the new people for the 2001 series, please share these tapes with your friends. We share all the literature we have, all the pamphlets, all the magazines, and I've got quite a collection already, but please feel free to share the videos also. This is what we do them for, so that you'll enjoy modeling even more. And I'm sure it's the same with Paul Walker or anybody that gets heavily involved in a semi-scale project. The first thing you have to do is have the idea. It's the idea of and a vision of what you want to try to accomplish. That's part of the problem with any semi-scale project. You need to select something that you're willing to pay the price to make the plane. Making a semi-scale plane is always a lot more work, probably 2 to 3 times the work than just building a traditional stunner. The reason we picked the Typhoon, very clearly 2 reasons. Biggest one, I love British warbirds. I just absolutely love Spitfires, Hurricanes, Mosquitoes. And at some point in time, I hope the Typhoon joins its rightful place in my Spitfire bedroom when we're done competing with it. Now, because we're going to be powering this model with a variety of 4-stroke engines and hopefully get throttle control on some or all of them, one of the things that makes a Typhoon very desirable is it has a relatively short nose moment arm and this big air scoop under the spinner where we can hide hopefully the whole motor, some of the muffling system, the throttling system, the batteries, and the servo. Again, I want to try to emphasize that what I've been trying to do over the past 4 or 5 months is come up with a reliable throttling system for this plane. I'd like to use the throttling system in flight if possible. Now, I certainly don't expect this model to be in a league with Al Rabe semi-scale planes, which had dihedral and various other semi-scale components that made them a lot more scale. But I do think this model is going to result in a very competitive, hopefully relatively simple to build and finish, and something that's not out of the realm of average modelers to do. Scott has worked up a set of very, very simple drawings and outlines for us to start with, but the way we always build our model is we work from very rough sketches, and as I actually build a plane, then what I do is from each part that I actually use to build a plane, I make an additional pattern for Elliot so that he can include them in on the plans, so that the final plans become an almost exact mirror image of the actual plane. As far as I know, and I could be wrong, and I'll certainly correct myself if I'm wrong, I don't think anybody has ever made a semi-scale model with a 4-stroke engine and an operational throttle and used it in control line stunt competing at the highest levels. I'm not sure that that's been done. I know other people have used various 3-line systems, but as far as I know, nobody's used a fully operational, all through the flight, throttle control on a semi-scale plane. And sometimes to go forward in life, you have to look backward and see where you've been and build on the successes and mistakes that you've made in the past. Now, as some of the new people might not really might not ever have even heard of, what we have in our house and what used to be my son's bedroom is the amazing Spitfire bedroom. And we fully hope at some point in time to add the as of yet unbuilt Typhoon to this area. It's one of the things that we use as a guest bedroom, and people that stay here seem to enjoy the company of these models and the posters and various awards that go with it, Army cots and whatever. During the Spitfire project, which went about 4 years, I accumulated a mass of information. Between Joe and I, we made 5 Spitfires. various other people have made copies of the model. But over the years, I would rank building those planes as being a high point of my modeling career, and one of the things I enjoyed immensely. I want to add to that now another British warbird that's still in my mind's eye. It isn't built yet, the plans aren't even finalized yet, but I have a picture in my mind's eye. The original Spitfire that Joe and I made exact copies of, and we flew at the 96 Nats. We had a great time with these planes. They flew with four-bladed props, Super Tiger 60s reworked by Big Jim Greenaway. This was really the first set of planes that I had made molded fuselage shells for, completely molded fuselage shells top and bottom, and fiberglass cowlings. This was actually one of the first molding projects I really worked on. We also molded our own canopies with the help of Dave Midgley. And for people that built Spitfires, those canopies were a big part of getting the plane right, since it's an unusual shape. Also, at that same point in time, we went on and developed technology for various molding projects like these little simulated exhausts, the spinners that were part of the parts were made by Ron Kiefer, and of course the fiberglass cowlings, which all the Spitfires share. Now, years later, when I look back at this project, and I say each project I've done, I've wound up using more composite parts and less wood. I've gone in that direction. And a year later, that was true. This plane has carbon fiber landing gear parts, spinner parts, cowling parts, a canopy that slides open and shut, molded balsa shells, a wing very similar to the original Spitfire but with blisters and cannons and a lot of scale detailing. Again, it's a British warbird. This is a Seafire, a carrier variant of the Spitfire. But again, each year it seems like what I was trying to do was add more and more composite parts and less wood parts, and each year we seem successful in doing that. The last of the Spitfire series, the I-beam Spitfire, featured a one-piece carbon fiber spar, very unique construction of the wing. It was the lightest of the Spitfires. Molded shells, a fully detailed molded canopy, some other very creative inking techniques, things that are on the videos. Now, we go back a lot further than this, but as an example, if you were not a subscriber in this period of time, during this time when we were developing things, I had put every step of every part on the video so that people, as they wanted to pick these techniques up and add them to their modeling projects, it would be very convenient for them to do it in having a video library. And I've helped many people establish, build, and share a video library. One of the things I've really enjoyed about being in the hobby was sharing this part of my life. And I don't know, during this part of my life, I built my fish pond. I've shared a lot of household construction projects, a lot of visits, a lot of nationals, a lot of things that have happened. And a lot of the things that came from this project are going to go into the Typhoon project. Or if you're a new subscriber, you might not realize we've spent about the last 6 months testing 4-cycle engines. One of the reasons is I'd like to try a 4-cycle engine in my next semi-scale plane. Biggest reason, the sound. Second biggest reason, they seem to be very, very user-friendly. And one of the things we've done is make a set of videos on developing the 4-strokes. Even for people that have no interest in throttles, it's a choice you might want to try. But we certainly never want to turn our video or our modeling experiences into a comparison of my model's better than yours, my engine's better than yours. I think we could just bypass that whole thing. It's just a negative drain on my energy anyway. The only one of the 4-strokes that I found to be very difficult to fine-tune and get the needle right, and I would not suggest anybody try, is the YS. It's a very powerful, high-performance engine, For very, very high skill level people, it might be appropriate, but I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in more than anything else, is coming up with a power package, a throttle, and a model that virtually anybody can buy, build, finish, fly, and hopefully add to their own personal Typhoon bed. Maybe someday this will be the Typhoon bedroom. Who knows? In the last year, we were able to videotape the entire construction, trim, flying, and nationals of our tribute to the late Gary Levitz, his Miss Ashley 2 Reno Air Racer. That model had a fully carbon fiber fuselage with no wood parts in it at all. Was possibly the lightest of the planes that I've ever built for that size plane, and had what I feel a very successful, for a prototype, experimental type of plane, I thought it was extremely successful. We're going to be working with that more in the future, but for right now, anybody that's interested in looking at those videos along with the Spitfires, the Strega, we have all of that information on video. It's available for anybody who'd like to build their own little windy video library. And when I received this award from the AMA a few years back, I was thinking, well, I really like getting the award. I mean, obviously I'm proud of it and everything, but I feel like the contributions I'm going to make to the modeling world are still in the future. They still have yet to be done. So we'll see. And it'll be fun. I encourage everybody to share all the information, all the videos. This is a wonderful hobby, and I really hope everybody enjoys it as much as I do. Now, we're also in the middle of developing several other things in our shop. One of the things we've been working with is a variety of 4-cycle engines. We have tested about 8 of them so far. The one we like the best so far, and we haven't tested the laser yet, we've only tested the Sato 72. The Sato 72 seems totally user-friendly. All of the information, if you're looking to set up a 4-cycle plane with relatively little hassle, some of the videos just previous to this, and they're on the end of the Miss Ashley series, about 4 or 5 of them. They're very, very informative, very helpful. I like to think from every model I've ever made, I learned something. From Miss Ashley, I learned that even though we had a lot of problems along the way, a fully carbon fiber fuselage is a practical reality in this hobby now. It's not a pipe dream. It's not something when you mention it, people say, oh, that can never be done. A couple of years ago when I had envisioned this, I had a lot of people say, oh, you'll never get it done, there's no way. It's done. It flew in the top 5. It flew despite some of my own personal problems I was working through at the time, but it certainly didn't let me down. Some of our older planes, and from time to time, even though we're in what amounts to be a New Jersey winter, from time to time we do get out to the flying field. And if we learn anything basically about the 4-cycle engines, we have a Max 52 that belongs to Don Dixon in this plane. We've learned a lot. We've learned a tank shim. We've learned what prop and fuel to use. But basically the thrust of what we're trying to do is going into the larger displacement motors. I just feel there's more potential. And there's certainly, the bigger they get, the more user-friendly they get. And that's a significant thing. Most of my planes, including Strega, have had every variety of engine from Tiger 60 to YSOS, PAs, jets, a lot of jets. Had a lot of good luck. I like retrofitting engines. I like comparing them. But I don't like to turn it into a negative comparison where it turns into your engine's better than my engine. What I suggest any engine comparison should be is, if you really want to know if it's appropriate for you, buy one of each. Do what I do, test them in the same plane, make your own decision, because almost everything that you read will be slanted one way or another. And most people that criticize engines have never had them in the same plane on the same day. It's one of the luxuries that I have by having so many planes and so much time to fly. I really do get to make legitimate evaluations. And every engine has a plus side, every engine has a minus side. There's no one perfect, absolutely perfect in every way engine. I haven't found one. Certainly I like the jets and the PAs. and I'm still making tune pipes. I haven't discarded that as part of my Air Force. I like tune pipes. I like the jets in particular. I love the 4-strokes most of all for the way they sound. And in a semi-scale plane, having that sound is a significant thing. We're also still working on, and we're working with Ed Gallagher and several other people to develop a full carbon fiber wing. That's yet to be proven whether we're going to be able to do it. We're still making tune pipes every day, making carbon fiber landing gear in the shop, trying to develop new things. These are all balsa molds for making balsa shells, nobler cowls. A lot of developmental stuff goes on in this shop. Plus, I'm kind of a workaholic. I found one thing that really is enjoyable to me is the fish that I have. I have an outdoor pond. I have an indoor tank. Things that kind of get me through a long day of modeling. And like I said, I do work a lot of hours. The fish are a big contributor. And this guy too. He has been, this is Peeps. He's been with us for almost a year. And he just, no matter who comes to the shop, he seems to want to get in on the action. So we hope you're going to enjoy it all. What we always need to do at this point in the year is look into the future, establish some kind of vision of what we hope to accomplish, and then from time to time not be afraid to change it if something better comes along. And so as we start this project, I look around, there's still some unfinished things to do that we'll be catching up on. 4-stroke development, tank design, throttle control. And we're going to try to make as many parts as practical given the time limitations out of carbon fiber and be sharing that technology, because I feel at some point in the future that may become a very common thing. Just like right now we accept carbon fiber props as a very normal part of the carbon fiber gear are certainly standard in the industry. There may be a day when carbon fiber wings or fuselages are just not an uncommon thing. Now welcome to the Typhoon project, and off camera on the, well, not off camera, on the last tape which ended the Miss Ashley series, and we had a little spare time. I did a thing about time management and managed to squeeze in making a few parts. We made up the fuselage sides, the nose ring, and our dummy crutch for what will be very soon, I hope in the next day or so, we're going to have time to turn this into a fuselage plug, which will become the plug for the mold for the carbon fiber Typhoon fuselage. Now today what we're going to try to do is just frame this up, rough it out. Since we made these parts, we made them on the last tape, and we did a kind of a dissertation on time management, what I'm trying to do is the same thing today. I'm trying to use my early morning hour to good advantage. What I'm going to try to do, because this is not really a fuselage, is I'm going to try to, well, I got to take the motor out. I just want to see if I'm going to have, see, here's one of my concerns in the final plane. How close that comes, but when you take away the thickness of the material, I'll have clearance back there. I also wanted to have, and this was something I really couldn't check until right now. See, I wanted to have the exhaust on a parting line. Needle valve doesn't matter, that'll come out the side. I need to pull the motor out and assemble this into one solid unit as the first part. Tip that I've found works well. When I start building a plane, I always try to get some kind of a little jar lid. In this case, these are Teflon mixing aids, to keep all my little parts in. As I disassemble things, what happens is sometimes I'll lose a little clip or a screw or something that I'm really losing time, and it's that time management thing that I'm very concerned with. So having even an ordinary jar lid, a coffee can lid, right on the work table to hold the screws, the hinges, the wheel collars, whatever little parts I'm going to be using. I was making a wood fuselage. This is half-inch wood. This would be where the tank shim. I would never want to make it right to the last little bit, but usually it trims out at about 5/8. So when I make up the actual mold, and in the case if I was not making, if this was a carbon fuselage, if this was going to be a wood one, what I would consider doing is using the 1/2-inch wood on top of the mounts like this, and maybe just putting an 1/8 inch here, so it would in essence be hollow inside. I might consider answering a phone too. Boy, it starts early. But as a plane evolves, every one evolves a little bit different. Sometimes you just get some good ideas, and we've always filled in the mounts here or made some kind of structure in there. Well, what would be very practical to do, because you need this tank shim anyway. This is part of the, you're definitely not going to do away, that tank is never going to go down on the mounts on a 4-stroke. So this would be an easy way to reorient how a plane that you intend to use a 4-stroke would be built. Now the downside is, then if you retrofit a 2-stroke, you want to try both or whatever, you'd need to get in here and cut that wood out or make a different size tank or whatever, or in some way it would be a problem. So once you do it this way, you're kind of committed to using a 4-cycle engine then. But they've all come out with the tank mounts roughly between 1/2 and 5/8, and I would guess 9/16 is probably exactly where they should be. Maybe what I'll do is eventually cut or make a piece of material exactly that thickness. I could do it with a 1-inch block, just set the rip saw. For making fuselages, crutches, Mike is going to be making a crutch real soon also, but he's going to be making it for a Tiger 60, I think. Part of, I guess, and it's part of the part of this that I really enjoy the most is every one of these airplanes is like children are. They're similar, but they're very different. Now, in the past, we've just added pieces, and we've never built a plane dedicated just for a 4-stroke. So what's going to happen, the reality here is, as we go along, certain ideas are going to come to fruition. You're just going to, when you see it, oh yeah, why don't we do it that way? Yeah, well, but we haven't done that yet. We have to think this through. Now, when it comes to the plan, Elliot made these really nice plans to work with, and they'll be real helpful, but as we go along building it, I'm going to make a template. I've already made a template for this part. So every part that I use, if you were to want to make, eventually like we have the Miss Ashley plans, take a set of plans and build a wood plane. You would have all of the outlines and shapes to make the wood plane. And in the case of, if you were going to make it a dedicated 4-cycle plane, you can make the crutch this way. This is one of the things that as this project evolves, I'm sure we're going to have hundreds of little ways. Oh, why didn't we do it that way? Why didn't we do it this way? And that to me is the challenge of modeling. The challenge of modeling isn't to take a plane that's already been built and just build copy after copy. If you do that, yeah, you know, you'll be more competitive, that's for sure, because less and less of your life gets tied up in inventing things and making things and developing. But the bottom line is it's boring to me. To me, it's only challenging when it's new and different and there's obstacles to overcome and things we haven't thought of yet. And what I'm hoping is the people that are joining us and going to watch the video, and I'm hoping Al Rabe is going to kind of look at this and go, ah, get rid of that. See, the more people you can get involved as a team, that's what makes this a very challenging project. And that's why I'm so stoked to get up early in the morning, get down here, manage my time efficiently, try to get as much of this done as possible. Because at the same time this is happening, there's another side thing that's happening, is our business is growing. And so it absorbs more of my time that way. And this guy's absorbing, get out of here, go absorb somebody else's time. Anyway, the first of the things we've kind of evolved, we're not even into the halfway through the first tape, and we've evolved something that might be worth trying on a dedicated plane. That's a different way, just a little bit different way of making that motor mount crutch. The first thing I want to do is take the 2 fuselage sides. With the 2 true sides, I've trued this table up because Mike's already been building off of it, so it's already been trued. And I want to take each one of the fuse sides and put the pins in at about a 45-degree angle. Because what I'm going to wind up doing from this, I want to make sure I have exact, and I mean exact, mirror images. This is one of the things, because we're making a plug for a mold. If this plug is crooked or twisted or in some way has a defect in it, every part we ever make off of this will be defective. Now, just look at the time we put into the Miss Ashley molds. we still have a spare fuselage. We want to make another Miss Ashley one of these days. Well, because the molds are pretty well preserved, we can do it real easily. Now, in this case, let's see how much off we are. Look at this. Look at this, Santa Claus. You're off by a 1/16 of an inch, so we'll take care of that. But this is the point, is once the sides are together and they're done on a flat table, I want to get them exact, just like making two flaps. I want them to be exact mirror images. I also want this angle, because this is going to set the nose ring in place, to be real accurate. Now I also need, shows you how prepared I am here. I want to make sure I'm working off 90-degree angles here. That looks good. I want to make sure these angles are accurate, and that if I run, whoops, because it's going to be the bottom edge of the fuselage. In other words, this is my reference line for lining everything up, but then when I actually go to assemble a plane and cut the piece out for the wing, I'll be using this dimension and then working off the bottom. This is where all the things that we learned on the Miss Ashley project, they just build. It's like building blocks. Now this amount I can take off also. A little bit of an inaccuracy like this, even a 32nd of an inch in the final plug or in the final fuselage, it would be a problem. So by doing it this way, this extra couple of minutes it takes to true up the sides and make sure they're exact mirror images. And of course, if we were making a fuselage instead of a plug, we would be using plywood doublers, which also the plywood doublers should be exactly equal. And then when the doublers are glued to the fuselage sides, the two units should be mirror images. Using pins to set this in place, making sure I have 90 degrees right down the road. And then what I can do is one little spot at a time I can tack. I don't want to run a real heavy glue seam yet. I want to make sure that I don't have an angle. I don't want one fuselage side tipping one way or the other. Now, Paul Walker in his Impact article had some really nice ideas making his own little plywood triangles. That's a good way to do it. Any way you can do it. Bob Hunt's father makes I think you can get it right from Bob Hunt, a fuselage jig if you wanted to upgrade your equipment, maybe a Christmas present. Certainly any tools that you have, and the tools that you don't have, it's real easy. You can make your own. In this case, I'll just go right down before I run a real glue seam. Constantly checking that I'm not building a twist into it. I'd like to really ensure. Now notice the front of this. Let me show this. I didn't even mention this. See how the front of this, where the blind nuts are, it hangs out over the end of the table. If you build and the blind nuts are up on the table, well, it's crooked. The blind nuts, because they extend down, you don't want to have them interfering with the fit. So the way I do it is just leave the area hanging out over the end of the table. Now this part's only tacked in between the pins. And using that 90-degree triangle, I can check it at every station. The earlier in building a plane that you can establish everything at 0, 0, and 90 and straight, the earlier in building, the better off you are, because later on, to compensate for things that are twisted, crooked, angled, it just takes 10 times the amount of work. And we're looking to save time and not have to waste any time at all further down the road. Now the last thing is I can just by hand pull this around and run a little bit of glue on that. Okay, now I just can run that glue seam down the whole other side, bring this back to the table. See how nice I have that curve in the front? Very convenient. Now what I can do when I'm all done with this, I'm going to make a little spline on this, And then I'm going to transpose so Elliot has an exact copy of the spline so we can get all these dimensions exactly right. And then I can trace actually the fuselage side out. But again, I want to work off a center line. And by having both of these pieces mirror images, when I join them at the tail, in essence, the curve should work out to be a very nice, almost like a ship's curve. If I don't work with equal parts, one is longer than the other, this will always twist in this dimension, twist in any number of dimensions. So it's real important get one side to be exactly equal to the other side, and then get the alignment at the front equal. Now the next thing we're going to do is just the same thing we did before, but to the other side. I won't bother going through that. The same alignment thing. I'll take it over to the end of the table, make sure it's aligned, make sure these lines are perfectly parallel, and check them all with the 90-degree triangle, and we'll have the second side installed. I have all the temporary little joints. I've checked all the 90 degrees. I can just run the glue seam right down the whole part. Just take the pins out now and do a double check on this. Now whenever a pin sticks, like this one is sticking, I twist it. If they stick, give them a little twist. Mark the true side of the fuselages with the orange, just an orange ink marker pen. I've double checked that everything is in 90 degrees. What I'm going to do is run this glue seam, and then I'm ready to start laying out the entire joint tail, and then lay out the formers and the spline. The next thing I did was just put a 1/8 inch piece on each side. I got to put the other piece on. And this is going to set my dimension for the tail. Just using a piece of the scrap we had left over from the fuselage. I want to put one piece on each side because this is a critical thing. What happens now is if I take these two, I could make a fuselage that's a real banana just by joining it like that. I can do that. I can do it the other way. But what I want to do is I'm going to make a template up. I want these pieces on, and I just want them tacked on. Then I'm going to make what I call a spine, but it's really a template. And it helps hold everything in alignment. First step is I just temporarily put a couple of tacks of glue in the back here. But now I want to lay out what amounts to be the spine on a piece of 1/8 inch wood. The thing I need to do is get a real accurate measurement of where the center of this is. Of course, my ruler now has a piece of tape that I was using on here. Having bad eyesight is really a handicap. Anyway, go right down. I'm going to get dizzy with this ruler here. Okay, so we know we have the outside width of this is exactly 3 inches. It means we can exactly put our mark on 1.5. I can transpose that down to the bottom. Now when I turn this over, the reason I need to have that, I need to have exactly that mark, and I can read it up. Exactly, okay. Now with that, I've taken a piece of artwork paper, and if you watch how this is done, this is the thing Lou Dudke years ago used to do something very similar to this. See what I did? I put a fold in the paper. You can use ordinary artwork paper, you can use any kind of paper. And all we want to do is from that make exactly, and I mean this is where it needs to get exact. I have the center right on the paper, and then what I'm going to do is trace down. I'm going to hold this down with my hand, and when I unfold it I should have an equal spine. See, by cutting both sides at once now, I see I can't really get it in the back the way I want it. Now when I take that off and I cut this with a scissor, what's going to happen is when I unfold it, I'll have exactly the same curve on both sides and a center line. The fold is the center line. Fold that. This will be my pattern, and it should be symmetrical. Now in the case if like Bob Martens, being a professional draftsman, has professional ship curves, yeah, but this is a way to do it for the cost of a piece of artwork paper. Now what I want to do, I want to make a center line on this and trace that piece. It's showing me that the two sides are symmetrical. But then by doing that I have an exact center line to work with when I fill this with formers. Now we pinned right to the center line. You can see we put a working center line on the wood, and since it's a fold out part, it's given us exactly the same as an expensive ship's curve would. And we can, from this part, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this real carefully, leaving the line on so it's a tad oversized, and then the last little bit trim out with a sanding block. See, from the spine that's cut out, I leave a little bit of extra material. And what's real easy to do here is the last little bit. Let's see if we can show this. Whoops. You can just get the last little bit off, and you can get it real dead accurate. Just sand the line right off or right up to the line using that little spine pattern. By the way, even if you're making a fuselage that you intend to use as a fuselage, this is a good way to make it symmetrical in the back and avoid that twist, or in some way that it's not as good as you'd like it to be. So now we have a real accurate replica, a spine piece. Now I'll leave the blue, the pattern for Elliot when he makes up the plans. The final plans will have all these parts on them. But what I have is a real symmetrical, real accurate spine piece. Now when you're making a fuselage, a lot of times what people will do, and Lou Dutke used to do this, give him the credit for coming up with some of this, what he would do is build a whole fuselage with this piece right in line with the motor mounts, and at the end of it, just before he glued on a top block for the last time, he'd get in there with a Dremel tool and hog it all out so there was nothing left when he was done. And you certainly could do that. Step, if you sight down this, is I just want to tack glue it in place. I want to tack it about every 6 inches. And then make sure, actually it looks pretty, one side is springing more than the other, but see, that's the point. What the spine does is hold, you know, this is symmetrical, and what you can do if you're really like a machinist guy, you can take some dividers and make equal measurements on each side of the center line, because what you want is the center line. What we want to do is establish that this center line is going right down a fuselage. Then what I can do when I'm all done, I can lay out, I'm not going to be able to do this yet because it's not glued in. I'm just trying to invent this as I go along. Lay this out to see that the center line is equal. In this case it's pretty good. But if it isn't, believe me, what you want to do if it isn't is make another spine or make the correction now, not after you have you know, the mold and the plug and everything finished. Now you can see right here, because this is a straight angle, I can reference off that, and I've got the center line right on the money with our steel, hopefully precision ruler. And once I have that, then this piece I can glue it in permanently. Everything is lined up. I'm going to run this glue seam the whole length. This is just tacked in position right now. And since I have a glue seam, I'm going to do both sides. Let this dry of its own accord. And then we definitely want to double check. You want to do that thing that works every time, just sight it. Sand this whole top edge. And then the last thing, I want to take it over to the table. It has the sandpaper glued to the table and make sure I have a perfectly flat edge to work with. Again, every step of the way, what I try to do is sight down it. The next thing is starting right behind the engine and working all the way back. I just need to fill this in with formers. Then all I'm going to do, I got to ensure that each one is 90 degrees. I don't want this to tip or in any way go off to one side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the T-square and make sure each former, I can use up scrap balls so they can be any thickness. I just need to fill this. Notice I haven't cut the wing hole out, because this is going to be a plug. There's no point in cutting it out. These are some of the things we learned on the Miss Ashley project. As long as we maintain this flat right here, and then I need to cut the piece away that's going to allow the tail to drop down into the fuselage. I just laid this on the fuselage itself. This is how thick it is. But I want to really make doubly sure that these are all 90 degrees. And again, there's no specific place. Boy, balls of dust. But what I certainly want to do is make sure they're all 90 degrees, whether I do it with a triangle or with this. Always a good idea to make them just a little bit oversized. Sand the last little bit. Drop them in place with the dust. Hey, here's what I do. I leave this on. Take a sanding block and leave the dust on. The dust will help kick it off. Before I glue any of these in, I'll tack glue them in, checking each time that they're at 90. I can also, if I want to make it really cute, I can set them 90 this way, I can set them 90 this way for right now. Up in the front there's no taper. And what I can do is, again, I'm just tacking each one. No permanent joints until I have the whole thing laid out. Satisfied that everything is 90 degrees, I'm just going to trim these off even. And then double check. It's always a good idea to double check that you have your 90, because once you start building a twist, and the first one sets the angle up. If this starts twisting off to one side, it's amazing when you're done how easy it is to build a little twist in a fuselage. And just kiss this one time. And the last thing I'll do is I'll sand this whole, this is going to be my flat area on that sanding, the piece of sandpaper that's glued to the table. But right now I just want to get everything just... Now, it's random where these formers are going to go, and I'll do this pretty much off camera. I just need to fill this with formers. Just by putting each one in, they can be, I'll use an up scrap also, but each time I'll check the 90, check the 90, check the 90. And even if I wanted to get even cuter, what I could do is put a center line on each former using a divider. Don't think that's really necessary, since this usually, once you get 90 degrees, this will usually stay in place relatively well. So laying out the formers, I came up with what I thought was a nice little tip. I put some green masking tape on the edge because it's just difficult to see to clear against the wood. That makes it a little bit easier to line up the formers. And because I have to put a bunch of them in, anything I can do, again, to save time is worth the effort. Now up to this point, what I did, I tried to get away with using 3 now because it's too soft in here. Normally you have plywood doublers in there. Now we don't have plywood doublers. So what I'm going to do is just add extra ones. But all these are, because they're actually over the crutch, these are all exactly the same. But I've been real careful to check that I'm not building at an angle of some kind into there. Now all the rest, I'm going to replicate these roughly at the same spacing. Each one will have to be individually marked and cut, but again, it's that 90-degree thing. It is so easy, and I've done it so many times. I've built a little twist in without realizing it. Okay, I got every former in there, but that's about the end of this session. Again, we're using time management. We'll probably try to get back down here tonight, get another hour or two in. What I want to do, and right here is going to be, I put the motor in, I want to set the clearance on the spinner. So what I'm using is the actual spinner itself, and this will give me an exact line of how much I need to take off, and I can leave the extra little piece on here. Let me just show this up close because you can see how much I need to take off on the grindstone. So I can, using this as my 90 degrees, I can get a real nice 90-degree fit on there. And if you didn't have a belt sander, you could just grind away at will, but I want to have a little bit of clearance. So in this case, I want to take the line almost all off. I also cut the top of these out, and of course I have to allow for when I make the block, I'll plug this up. I want to have the block sit completely down on there. That's the amount of material we need to take off, and we'd like to take it off at an almost exact 90 degrees. How convenient that lines up, and now because we've left it oversized, we can do the final tuning. We can take the spinner, we take the motor right out and do this final, just take the line off. But we want to keep, see, a problem is you don't want to do this on a belt sander because then you have a flat spot. We want to have an angle up. So I'll do this with the motor out and just put a little bit of a taper on that. But I have plenty of clearance now, and I want plenty of clearance because I want to take into account that when we do the final carbon layup here, I want to be able to fine-tune this just a little bit, and I can get the gap exactly right. Because this will be a molded-in part, so having a spinner and being able to get that just right will be really nice. It should be very nice. It better be very nice. Out, you can see how much we need to drop this line down, and I took this tracing right off the actual spinner, and I'll just do that with a sanding block. Good is just to simulate it, to hold the sanding block at just a little bit of an angle. It seems like as you work around, you can just go right up to the end of the pen line. And what it does, it gives us just a little bit of an angle. We want that angle to simulate the spinner angle. I have to, before I can do the top block and lay out the block, what I have to do is just mark the section that's going to be missing from the tail here, because we're going to cut this top out, notch it for the stab. I want to transpose that dimension, and Elliot has it as I just happen to have a 1/2-inch ruler since it's going to hit right in the top. Now what's going to happen is I only want to carve the top block piece now. It's going to end right here. This will be a separate section of the model. So right here is my end, and I can use up one of the short blocks, one of the blocks that I don't need to use up a 48-inch block here. Okay, the next step is I have the little piece in the back marked off exactly where I want it to end. And what I'll do is I'm trying to figure out if these are the things you don't really know until you finish it. Okay. What I want to do is take this over to the belt sander, get a nice smooth edge on one side, so it's a nice, see this is a little bit of an angle here. These cuts are not 90 degrees. And you see this block it's bowing off that way. Well, we don't really care, but because we're going to cut the middle of it out, but I want to see if I can somehow capture it. No, I can't. You're always trying to do this. But the first part is to figure out which way this angle has to go. And then I can take it over to the belt sander. These probably aren't even cut. They're just, they must have had a pretty dull blade when they cut that. And these are not 4 to 6 pound blocks, so on a plug like this, I can just use up some 9 or 10 pound wood, whatever I have. This is the way most balsa wood comes back. Now we have a nice 90-degree edge to work off. I'll mark the back and do the same thing at the back. Now I can trace around this and then lop off most of the extra, make sure I have a decent fit up here. Since we're working, and it's on purpose, we're working on a 3-inch fuselage, so we can use standard wood for this. I'll leave this all just a little bit oversized. I always leave this just a little bit oversized when I make the cuts. Like I said, I always use pens that write. But just leave the pen line at about a 1/16 on. Again, I always like to leave that last little bit on. Not get too close. Now we're not going to get to carve this today, but I'll get it all packed up. See, the advantage of doing it this way is get it all set up for tomorrow, and as soon as I can come down to the shop, it won't matter even if I'm on the phone. I can carve and plane and sand no matter what, even when I'm on the phone, but I can get it all set up. I need to kind of pay attention while I do this to joining up. Like, we're not going to have to ever take this block off. We're not going to hollow it out or anything. So what I want to do is just roughen up the bottom, but leave the sanding dust there. In fact, before I even do this, I have to take into account, I need to take into account the thickness of the blind nuts and the thickness of the motor. So before I can do that, let me just trace this out as to this is where the blind nuts are. And this is probably where the motor is going to be. And what this will allow me to do, I can Dremel some of this out so that I can get this to sit flat when the motor's in place. Now I don't want to take any more than I have to, and I don't have to make it pretty, but I know we have that vent. The Sato has the vent, and it does stick down below the mounts quite a bit. But what I'll do is I'll cut some of this away. And then I'll just do a dry fit and see if it's pressing in here anywhere before I can lock this in position. Now watch what happens after you do this a few times. See, there's where the vent is, so I need to take that into account. The motor looks like, but you could always, if you really want to be fancy, if this was my motor, I'd put a little carbon paper, a little piece of carbon paper here even. Press it down. But now I'll take this out and I'll carve away from this. I don't want to keep pushing down on that. And we'll be ready to snap this into position. And because we're not trying to take this off again, we're never going to take this apart, we can just run the whole glue seam at once. With that all installed, that's about all we're going to get time to do today. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Well, it's almost Thanksgiving time. We're looking forward to a nice family Thanksgiving. Looking forward to this squirrel eating the rest of my pumpkin too. Now we got another load of foam wings from Johnny Duncan. I went through these one by one. These are the ones that we've already sold. Boy, oh boy, the quality. Trust me, if you're looking for a foam wing, get a hold of John Duncan. He is putting out some real quality stuff. And check this out, guaranteed 7-day delivery. He made it today, would have been the 7th day. All right, John. Cold out like this, and winter is here. It's nice to know there's a warm cup of coffee waiting in that shop. This came today, and I have some of these. I don't know if I have this one. This came from my good friend, Dwayne Rothman. I was hoping he'd find a little Typhoon. It's another Spitfire to add to our collection. Well guys, these things are really nicely detailed. I have a collection upstairs. We will add him to the collection, of course. And boy, we would love to find a Typhoon. Look at the nice prop. The detail is just unbelievable on these little models. And they're real helpful. Say you were doing some inclines and you want to see what some of these things look like in full scale. What a great little thing to collect. And we really have a lot of them up in that Spitfire bedroom. Wayne sent some pictures here, and he was out at an air show out in Grumman. Sunken Meadow Park, in fact, is the name of it. And I guess they had the Thunderbirds out there. Pretty cool. Anyway, everybody knows I've made a Thunderbird. Just did some nice pictures. Dwayne, hey, I have to tell you, baby. This would be a great model. Turn your Cardinal kit into a Thunderbird. Anyway, Dwayne sent some other stuff here. A nice note, of course, saying, Wendy, I love you. You know, we ought to get to be friends. Yeah, sure, Wayne. Just kidding. I put this on tape. Mike will love this. Speaking of Mike K, he's gotten really good. Well, you know what, Dwayne? You could be good, too. All you got to do is move in with Wendy here. Feed me pizza and build in my shop. Some copies of things. I have no idea. I'm going to read these, of course. Engine information. Hey, we're gonna definitely check this out. Anyway, Dwayne, and another magazine. You never have too much. You never have too many things to read. And he sent a nice magazine, which we have a copy of this already, but now we'll have an extra copy to loan out for those in our midst. And if you're a new subscriber, keep in mind, we will loan you anything it takes to get you to build a semi-scale model. Anyway, thanks, Dwayne. Appreciate it. Okay, this is John Duncan's new number. New number, not in Pampa yet. If you're interested, 518-583-8839. And he's doing some great work. Now today, our primary thing that we'd like to accomplish is to carve the top block. Now, because this is a plug, we're not going to have to hollow it out, so that's one thing. Normally we would just have a tack glue joint here that we'd separate. But a couple of tips that I've found from the front, if you know, and in this case this is there's no turtle deck involved, so I basically can go by with either a plane or a large knife and I can take off as much of the corners. I can take big rough amounts of wood off before I get to the final piece. Now, that always seems to be one way of doing it. Now, from the side, I have the plan laying right here, and it's going to rise a certain amount and then drop a certain amount. So I can kind of look at where this block is, and the block is about a 1/4 of an inch oversized in every dimension, and I can start to lop off, roughing it out. Now another way that I've done this And I just want to put this on just because this is the time most people would be involved in this. If you're making like a cardinal type, or I guess an impact on one of Ted's planes, where it has this little piece here, if you can get a bandsaw and take this piece out ahead of time, boy, does that save a lot of work. What I've seen a mistake happen, I've seen a lot of people that they're trying to carve, let's say here's the spinner shape, and what they wind up doing is they're carving in little amounts, and you're spending 3 days before you get down to anywhere near where you should be. Well, if you know you don't need that material, get it off of there. You don't need that, get it off. And then as you get closer and closer to what you think the projected end is going to be, then you could start taking ice shavings and then maybe even take it outside, use the sanding, a rough sanding block or whatever. But I guess that's just some of the thoughts. That is one final thought. If we were going to use this for a block, we would certainly, and let me just lay this out. We've got plenty of this on video. I don't want to make an all-day project out of this, but because I want to get carving. But once I establish that shape that I really want, and now let's say that is the top block shape that we're going to use, then I can take a piece of balsa wood and glue a razor blade in it with roughly 1/8 of an inch of razor sticking out of it. And we've done this on video a lot of times. This is just a little piece of plywood. The razor blade sticks out. And what that does, as you run this down into the block, it puts a lot of 1/8 inch depth indentations on it. The only piece that plywood serves is it lets that sit down. So now you can undersize, you carve and sand away until you've removed that 1/8 of an inch. And when that's gone, the material that's left is a perfect plug, and in most cases what this would look like when it's done would be something like this, like a shell. And you could use that to make your mold, and we've done plenty of that on video. Just thought I'd mention it right now. This is a good way to undersize. If you're going to make a balsa wood fuselage, by the time you hollow this, I could make 2 or 3 shells. Now it's even better than that, because what happens if one person makes that plug, that mold, other people can mold right from it. So in the case of people making Spitfires, Miss Ashleys, and whatnot, Stragas, I think we have 7 of these altogether. We can make a shell for you, or even better, which is what my first choice would be, to loan you the mold at a low rental fee of 1 pizza pie. Anyway, that's just some of the things that make modeling a little more fun than just carving up these big giant blocks. You can see even in my wood collection here, there's only so many of these blocks left. But these are 2 nice ones. But there just aren't an unlimited supply. And that's the problem. And when you go to buy blocks, not all of them are 4 to 6 pounds. So if you can use shells, boy, anytime you can use shells instead of blocks, you're going to be way ahead of the game. One of the things I want to do is I know roughly what the side shape should be from looking at the plan Elliot's drawn. So I can kind of, I shouldn't have with my ruler. Be prepared. I can get some idea of how much is going to come off here, just roughly, and I'll leave plenty. This is going to be the high spot here. I'm just doing this for my own mind's eye. We're getting down like 2/3 of that. I have it now. I don't know if Mike used this plane already. And I can start basically just taking off the corners. Now let me just say, the plane works the best. Let me show this up close. When you hold it, rather than trying to go against an edge, hold it at a 45-degree angle. That's the trick to getting a nice spiral cut. And you know it's cutting the best when you see one big shaving come off in one piece. If you can get the whole length in one piece, it really helps a lot. What would typically happen, if you hold a plane this way, 90 degrees to the part, it'll take a cut. And there's really no substitute for a fresh blade. Here's how you can tell if you need a fresh blade. See all the chattering going on? We absolutely need a new blade. But if you hold this at a 45-degree angle, see, we're due for a new blade here. The only problem is Be Prepared doesn't have a new blade. I really should replace the blade. I just don't have another one sitting right here on a bench. Choices I have is a Master, I don't know, Master Rascal. I think I got this from Brodak, but because I don't have a blade for the other plane, I think I'll try. Let's see how this one. See, this one is making shavings real quick. Now, holding it at an angle, you can see there's no chattering on this, which means the blade is probably half sharp anyway. Now another trick, as I get down to the very edge here, you can see I don't have much to carve. What I'll do is I'll lay a piece of green tape along the edge, so it gives me something to work up to and keep this part just a little oversized. And then the last little blend I'll do, just using a sanding block, and I'll do that outside to save some of the dust in the house. See, this is a good idea when you get down to the close to the edge, same as carving in a wingtip. This is a nice little way to give yourself the benefit of a doubt. When you start carving or sanding into the tape, you know you have to kind of back off. Believe it or not, we don't have a blade for this plane either. We're going to have to tough this out because always have extra blades. See what happens? This is the truth. Other people that work in a shop, won't mention any names, when they do a carving job, they always like to reach over and grab one of those nice new fresh blades. Then along comes Wendy, hasn't carved a block all year. This one's not too bad. We can live with this one. We're just roughing this out anyway. Anyway, I find you can use a big number 26 blade. A plane gives you a lot of control when you get down to the end, but this is just about what a typical carving, and obviously you could go along for hours with this. I got to work my way right down until I have the last little bit of material. But as I'm doing this, I know I have to start favoring the front and favoring the back at the same time. If I want to take a lot of material off down in the front here, I can use just hog it right off. Again, what I'm trying to do is hold the knife on about a 45-degree angle. This is not not even a good block. If this were going on a plane, I would be right now cutting it off and deep sixing it, but for a plug, this is one area you can use up. Especially if you're making a plug for a molded balsa shell, you can use up a 12-pound block or whatever. And believe me, there's no shortage of them. Just order blocks from any balsa supplier in the world. You'll get plenty of them. Now you can see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to work some of the material, very roughly work my way down, like walking down steps, into where I want the final piece to be. At this point we've kind of got the nose roughed in, but you can see we still need to take more of an angle off in the front. I'm trying to work the front first because the back has more of a slant. The front has a curve to it, not a straight line, and then the back tapers back to where we're going to have the joint for the take-apart features. But this is basically what you pay 20 bucks for when you buy a 4-pound block, a pile of scrap. Now you can see what I've tried to do is rough in one side, and now as I'm doing one side, I'm trying to feel for how much material I have to remove from the other side, working back and forth. It's hard to make a plan for any single area, but try to work that one side in. Then I want to get the last thing is I'll lay it up on the plan and get that last little curve in. Now what I tried to do is just roughly figure out how much of that taper is going to be in the back. Of course it's reversed. I want to take that, what I'm working on now is the side profile view, just laying it up on a plan, trying to estimate, leave a little bit extra, and just get that contour. Well, not at this point in time, you can't really get it close. You just get it as close as you can, and then you can get the curve. The last part is to get the curve in. As we're carving, Peeps is having the time of his life, stealing chips and bringing them in his cage. See what I did? I made him a little, we call it Peeps Hotel. I made him a little nesting box, and what he's doing, he's bringing all this junk into his cage as I'm carving. And I've been real careful with this. See, the temptation is always to take too much off in the first chopping. Now that it's in this contour, now I can look at the side view and start working this curve in, little by little. Start working this curve in. But there's no doubt about it, this is definitely a time-consuming, probably take me all day. I will spend as much time as I need to, because once I make the mold, it's probably about $100 worth of material go into making a mold. And I sure wouldn't want to have it that, oh gee, why didn't I just do this or do that? I'd like to get it as close as I can right now. The nice part is when you get down to the end, you can even drop the blade further back in, because then it gets relatively easy to get nice clean shavings. I call that ice shavings. It starts to shave real nice. But again, still very time consuming. And this is what attracted me to molding in the first place, is I just don't want to do the same operation over and over and over every time I want to make a design that I've already made. I'm willing to do it once, and then I want the next one to be a little easier. Now I find another thing too, that I can feel high spots a lot easier than see them. Right here I can see I have a high spot. Trying to keep this garbage on the table, but our friend Mr. Peeps keeps coming over and helping himself. I think he's making a nest in that little box I made for him. And again, what I do is, I have the drawing right here. I lay it right up on it. I can see I've got, whoa, I'm close. I got a little more taper to put in the nose. Now when I get to the last little bit, I'll put the actual spinner and motor in here and then do the final little hand sanding that way. Now finally, after, look at this, happy top block. It's rough except for the sanding. The sanding I'm going to try to do outside if possible. What I try to do is, because we're kind of, well, I'm trying to get downwind and turn this, get the rough sanding off. This is, and it's chilly out here. We have just enough wind to blow the dust away. Maybe in 10-15 minutes, ooh, the sun's coming out. Look at this, just as I need it. Because I'm candling it the same way I would Same way I would candle anything. I'm going right up into the tape, but not sanding the tape away. As soon as I can hear it hitting that glue joint, and I'll do the rest of this basically off camera. You can see how it turns from very rough up by the nose, and I'm just roughing it out with 220 paper. Important last step in the roughing out, and I don't like to do this outside because I need to really look at it carefully, rub my hands on it, is I want to get, because we've been sanding this way, it usually has a lot of little flat spots on it, and this will tend to get out some of, most of all, and then I can kind of go back the other way. Winter is here, baby. Boy, when you get back in the house after being out there for a while, oh, Anaheim. Now what I do is I work my way right up until I see I'm losing the tape. Then I know the last thing, I'll take the tape off and make that final blend down there. What I did, I put some cross-grain pieces up here just to give me a little more meat to work around, because we're going to start carving that nose up pretty soon. Notice the grain direction so it actually becomes plywood. Now what that's going to let me do is, as I start carving in, I can start to see the other grain direction, like carving into plywood, and it should help in getting this symmetrical. I don't know if it will, but it should. Okay, that's the end of this session, and boy, I'm still breathing in this dust. But it looks like we've pretty much got the contours that we want. Now you can see this. And what I always try to do as a last thing, just get some idea of what the spinner fit will look like. Just get a rough idea if we have that shape right. We'll come back and work on this tonight. Today what I want to do, I want to set in, I need to remove this piece. Anyway, that top block looks like, now that I'm looking at it closely, it looks pretty nice. What I need to do is remove the piece where the tail is going to actually sit in. I need to put this radius on here. And what I'll do is I'll cut one side. What I'll do is I'll cut one side and then use that side to trace the second side out. Now what I want to do is, once I get this piece off, I want to use this exact piece on the other side. Okay, we're running into the formers here. Okay. Now I want to use this exact piece. I need to get the radius there, of course, but this will set me up. I need to get the radius in there. Now that's the area where the stabbing elevator is going to sink down. Kind of a critical thing to keep the alignment, and keep the alignment when looking from the front, that I'm not building a twist into it. I want to make sure I'm working off the center line here. I want to make sure I have this edge, and I see it's off just a little bit. Because I'm going to be putting this side has to get trimmed just a little bit. So let me just I'm going to cut this piece off, and then I'll sheet this with 64th plywood. This is going to be the saddle that the tail actually sits in. You know, the way I can do this, an easy way, there really is no easy way, I'm kidding. This just gives me a reference, and I'm holding this down, eyeballing this. That looks like it'll be just about right, and then I can take the material off. That's the little amount I need to remove. To say, this saddle has to be extremely accurate, because when we look at it in this dimension relative to the wing, and we're referencing everything off the bottom center line, I want to make sure this saddle is in completely straight. It's not off that way or that way. I also removed some of the material in here because it's easier to get a flat surface on an edge than it is to get it on a whole flat area. And the reason I wanted that is I want to do a little bit of fine tuning here before I actually put that plywood piece in. Now, assuming this is going to be straight, if it's high on this side, I'll take a little material off this. High on this side, I'll take some off here. Let me get the phone. Because we're using this as our reference, that I want to make sure I'm right on this. I haven't put a warp in here. Okay, that's relatively accurate. Now I can pick up a dimension on both sides. I know you're not going to believe this, but it is accurate. Now, if it wasn't, if one side was a little high, because once I make this lay in that piece of 64th plywood, that's going to set the mold. And this is a reference not only in height. In other words, I can reference the height now. Let's just get a number here that I'm happy with. You see, the height is constant from the table. The center line here is constant to where the block is, and also the bottom up to the point where it rises up in the back. These are all constants. It's hard to believe this worked out on the first shot. The way to do this is I tacked it up here. This is still free. And then I held this in with I was trying to invent this as I went along. But now I need to get the whole seam in one shot if I can. Again, the objective here is to get this perfectly flat. We'll check it again after. Okay, and obviously the next thing, we'll get some scissors, trim this off. Remember, we have the grain going in this direction, so it wraps real easily. Now the last little bit I'll take off with a Dremel tool over by the sanding bench, but I want to make sure this is perfectly flat, and that this angle's 90, and that this radius here will match the radius of the tail that we're going to make. This is one of the problems I have when I'm looking for my Dremel tools. Every once in a while the bit that I want winds up somewhere other than in the little rack that we're supposed to hold them in. Anything you see you like there? What do you think? This is Home Depot when you're going shopping? Look at this, he's already got one out. I need the Dremel tool. Hey! In the neck. Anyway, what I'm trying to do is just get this edge in. Of course, first you have to find the Dremel tool. Once you find a Dremel tool, the rest of the job is easy. Now luckily Uncle Mike is here with his tail, because we need to do a little fitting. Let me borrow your tail. See what I've been doing? The little radius, I didn't press that down far enough in there, but I just inserted a little piece of balsa to take up the cavity. And I want to make sure I have a good fit now. I want that, because the tail Mike is making is going to be very similar to this. I want to see if that radius is nice and smooth. It there, because this is important. We want to get that Okay, it's this part of it we want to get right before we go any further. Okay, that's good. Take your tail away. You can go work on your hinging. Convenient, just handy that Mike happens to have his tail here. He's been working on it the last couple of days, which kind of follow through with his project. How's the wing in silver?
No, not yet.
Not coming up on silver?
Yeah.
Too cold to paint out there today, pal.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. I want to get all these radiuses smooth, and this acts as a little bit of a former. Now, if you don't put a former here, what happens? The end of it tends to lose its shape. This way we have that shape just about what we really want. Hey, the challenge of this is going to be, and I've been thinking about this all day, the challenge is going to be replicating that big Typhoon scoop. We have the drawing outline, but the problem, not really a problem, the part of it that I'm not sure of is how I want to make the mold with as simple of a parting line as possible. Not sure I'm explaining that right, but so what I'm going to do is the first thing is I'm going to go try to cut a couple of blocks of scrap wood to make at least the minimum of the outline, and I can do that with, it looks like 2 blocks. I'd like to have the grain going front to back if possible, but you can see from looking at it, and I wish there was an easy, see, I always have the books right out on the table, but that's quite a big piece, and I need to start with a relatively big block. I found this I was using this for a piece to hold a mold. It's a piece from a mold, and this looks like it might be big enough. Yeah, I'm still going to need to do it in 2 pieces. So, you know, you can see how big that'll cover that, but the problem is it's not going to cover it in 1 piece. And I'd like to have the grain going. Now, one of the biggest mistakes of making a cowling block, this is not a real good piece of wood anyway, is you like to have a relatively simple parting line. Well, this is not going to be simple because we want this whole piece to come out as a mold in 1 piece. So we need to think this through before I can go on. What I try to do is make this piece 1 piece and then add a piece to the bottom. This way I can bury the seam a little bit easier. But it's really a complex shape, and so being able to get as few seams in here as possible certainly will help some. Now what I envision being able to do possibly is use this piece as the bottom piece, so I don't waste any material that way. And I'll have to put that cut in the bottom. Okay, I got the block semi-roughed out, but what I need to do is in here, because this will have a convoluted shape, I need to put a spacer in here. Right now, just get some scrap balsa to make a spacer, because ultimately that nose is going to have that shape. It's a little bit of a convex shape. So from the 1 piece of wood I was able to get. Boy, when you look at it big like this. Now right where the 2 circles are going to join, right in there I need to put maybe a piece of 1/4 inch or so, because this is going to have that figure 8 shape, that convoluted shape. And here's where I need to make extra thickness so that curve can go in. After just tacking this block in place, I left a little room because what I want to do is I want to make a light ply template up for this shape, so I have something to start my carving with, something to start with. And of course it's oversized in all dimensions right now. Hey, notice how some of the variants have a completely round scoop and it looks like it's almost the identical diameter of the spinner. Other variants have this kind of flattened egg-shaped scoop.
Some have this extremely flat. There's like 4 or 5 differences I've seen in the pictures. This one shows a much more egg-shaped front end. Again, some of the pictures show it almost round, so we're gonna have a lot of leeway here when we start the carving. Photo, it looks almost completely round. In this photo, almost completely round, and the 2 circles touch. And this one, very egg-shaped. I laid this out with a piece of light ply in what I thought would be the biggest round diameter, and now I want to kind of, instead of making it perfectly round, get a little bit of a chin going here. Again, this is a lot of looking at the mind's eye to figure this out. Elliot has noted that the back part of this, from looking at the pictures, is flat. So it's flat and it transitions into a curve. Now what I'm going to do, because it's getting late, and this part alone took a whole session. So I'm going to come back fresh to this project in the morning, get ready to carve and sand and try some different shapes here. And I see I have a lot of leeway, a lot of options. And also, I also just can hold the spinner on to get some idea of what that's going to look like. Today my primary job is to try to get, and I've looked at this from 100 different angles, I even thought about it last night, to get this scoop right. And another thing, it does not come out, if you look at the real plane, it does not come out and end. It comes out and then curves around. So I'm going to kind of go with a little bit smaller line in here and then try to do all the curving working around. Now I thought this was going to take, you know, a lot of time. Well, what I did, I started improvising different shapes, using templates and using every possible way. And I finally got disgusted. I thought I'd do it with a mechanical device, you know, just trace out that size diameter. I didn't like that. And I wound up putting as many of these shapes, constantly varying the curve, until I thought it looked pretty much like what it should. And now what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to make a plywood template, maybe 64th plywood, and improvise it in here, and then I can carve to that template. Now I think we're going to go with this shape. What I'm going to do is cut this out, and then I'm leaving a line on so I can just do that last little bit of a curve in. Because if you look at this, even from several different angles, it isn't a straight line, it's a real curve. From every angle this curves in. Very aerodynamic when the final product. Kind of jobs, I always try to leave the books with the pictures right out where I can constantly look at them back and forth to see if I'm making it too big, too small, or whatever I have in my mind's eye. What I'm trying to do is just work one side at a time, just rough out as rough as I possibly can. Remember, I made all these blocks a little bit on the overside. You're constantly getting the feel for just, there's a flat spot down here. And I have that little plywood template up in the front that I'm going to try to carve to. Carve it up in one dimension, and I need to get that little convoluted shape in here. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to use this parting line, even though I did it because I wanted that exhaust. Maybe that I'm going to have to change that. Not going to know until I actually lay this out. It's always easier to work one side at a time until I get a good feel for how the shape is going to be. By little this is coming around, but you can see I'm working one side at a time. Already started some of the rough carving to get this in shape, but of course the Dremel tool can be helpful. I'm trying to get that curve that comes around here. Just doing it step by step. It's taken a long time. Luckily Mike's keeping me company here over at the sanding machine for the last couple hours. But it always starts out, you can rough out as much of the material as you can, and the last little bit we'll sand it in with some dowels and some rubber polywogs. some of these, the various sizes of polywogs, tadpoles, whatever you want to call these. These come in real handy for getting that shape where the spinner blends into the cowl. And what I always do is always use sticky back sandpaper with these. And you can move the sandpaper up, 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 or down to get a line here, just to save some sandpaper. Spent the better part of yesterday and the better part of today. And the part that's really difficult, and I didn't think it would be that difficult, I got it upside down, would be getting the curve. You see that curve? The curve that actually enters into the scoop? I thought this was going to be relatively easy. I've done this over about last night I just gave up. So I'd come out and look at it again today. Well, I'm looking at it today, and I see two problems. First off, I should have put a doubler behind here. I'm already, as I'm carving this in, I'm running into daylight here. I'm going to have to get back in there and back that up with some wood. But what it's given me is I can see that it's symmetrical now by doing it that way. But the more, the more I look at it, and this really, really took a lot longer than I thought it was. Took a couple extra sessions. I'm getting that nose shape to be what one of, you can hardly even see it. But you see that bulge where it goes out. It's one of the things I wasn't aware how time consuming it was going to be. But I'm going to work on this again today. I'm going to do it with fine sandpaper. I'm still not happy too, and these are the things you don't know until you actually get too far into it to make the correction. I thought this parting line, I could somehow figure out a way of putting a cowl retaining screw here, and it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do that. Again, we'll find out. I like this parting line, but I still need to figure out what I'm going to do up in this area here. Because molding this reverse curve, this will be possible, but I want to have the joints real nice. See, after you make something in 3 dimension, it's nice to look at a side view, but once you do it in real life, and I've got a pretty good representation. Also in the back here, this is going to be an air outlet of some kind back here. I've got that angle about right, but again, this really, really just turns into a time-consuming job. Again, this is one of those areas that, because it's going to be a focal point of the model, one of the things that defines it, and because I'm going to make a mold, I'm willing to spend a lot of extra hours and a lot of extra sessions if necessary. You can see the variety of sanding blocks and tools I've been using. By the way, this is one that works real well, an old Ringmaster leading edge. Polywogs to get this shape, because once I have the mold made, one of the nice things is there may be somebody out there who wants to build a Typhoon, and I can, cowlings will be available at the right price. Well, maybe not exactly the right price. Or if we ever make a Typhoon kit somewhere down the road, you'll just mold up the cowlings. It won't be a big deal at all. But now, the trick I wanted to show, and this works real well. By the way, I'm using up all of Mike's old thin CA. I wouldn't build a model with old CA. I've just ordered about a dozen of these new CAs from John Brodak. But for making a mold or a plug, using up old CA is fine, because it's not really holding anything. And again, I went through here, I made that a little too thin. Once you see something like this in 3 dimensions, it's amazing how quick you can figure out where the thing should be, but I'm not sure about that. I thought I could figure a way of doing that, but like all the well-laid plans of Wendy's and Mike's. Anyway, getting this shape, I just feel like even if I have to spend the rest of this session doing it, there's certain things on a plane that it really has to be right. And in this case, this for sure is one, because when you look in here, you're going to see the valve covers and the parts of the Sato, or the laser. You're going to see something interesting anyway. And the other thing, we don't have to be able to get in there and choke the engine. The engine choking is not a factor in this. And we don't know if Warren Walker's going to be able to, he's been working on it, come up with some kind of a trick exhaust system that'll snake inside the body. But I know having this come up just at the right angle, and this little relief in here, those will be defining features that really will set the model apart. wish I could say, even though I have this pretty well roughed in, I wish I could say I was happy with the way this is going to work out in the front here. It looks like well, we'll see when we're all done making a mold. What I want to do is I want to get a brand new blade in here and pop this block out, because I have to get in there and put some backing wood behind this where I'm getting thin to do the rest of the carving. But so far, yeah, I shouldn't say, I've spent about, well, I don't know, probably 6-7 hours getting this shaped the way I wanted it to, and so far it really is a perfect match to the plan. So I hope Elliot is impressed. I hope everybody's impressed. This looks, because it's not totally scaled, it looks a lot easier than it is. It's really difficult getting that last little edge down there. Tool, this is one of the Dremel attachments with saw teeth. Well, this is great for cutting a piece of plywood, but let me just warn you, and it's because I've really, in the past, not respected this the way I should and wound up touching it with my finger, and boy, that will just go right through your finger like balsa wood. That is one of the few tools that Dremel makes that's really truly dangerous and can truly hurt you. Be careful using those little saw, and the thinner ones go right through a fingernail and everything. They go right through the plywood. I'm going to just real carefully pull that apart. Now, I may have to glue it back together, take it apart 50 times. I don't care, because the next part of this is I need to get that trough in there to the angle that I'm, well, if you look at the photo again, it goes almost back to the wing, but we still want to get that to be a lot more scale. Again, I still don't know. I'm going to have to reinforce this little piece or it's not going to be with us long. It already snapped off once. And I need to remove the material in the ring here with a Dremel, but most of all to get in. See what I did that wasn't too smart. I ended the doubler here and I should have ended it much further back. So I'll put that piece in. It's just a scrap piece to reinforce that. And this piece, again, I'm looking at how can I possibly get a realistic way of making this cowl detach in one piece. We're going to work on thinking about that anyway. Do a parting like this, there's always some little chunks that come out, and what I do is just fill in the little chunks with little pieces of scrap, let the CA dry, make them the size of corks. You can see I think there's one right up here chunked out. It's hard to get a nice even piece. Once that dries, I'll just trim that off. But at least I get to see this now in 3-dimension, and I can get a better idea of how I'm going to do the mounting. About time management, I'm even eating my supper right at the molding table here. Anyway, the little chunks are done, and I'm trying to every hour or so get a look at that. I put some little blocks inside, and now I'm going to continue, get a dowel and some sandpaper and get that shape more like a figure 8. With the pieces apart, of course, you can, you know, I put little pieces in there and you can get the radiuses. It's a lot easier holding this in your hand than working on it, but we'll eventually obviously make a separate mold for this. And I also need to put where this ends, that little piece on the end, because that's where, in other words, like a funny car, I want the whole front to come off in one piece. Right up to where the wing comes out of the body. This will all come out in one piece. Done here in this session is I want to work this groove further back. Again, a ringmaster leading edge just happens to be close to the diameter I'm looking for. I tack glued this back on. So this is what takes longer to do than a standard, like a cardinal or an impact or whatever. Is it's supposed to look like something, well, somewhat like something anyway. But again, once the mold is made, where's my little guy? Once the mold is made, if I were to make a second or a third one, see now, if this were a really bad year, and for whatever reason, I needed to make another Miss Ashley because all the molds are done, it would be a relatively simple job. Anyway, we're starting to get, I have that extra piece of wood in there. I get this whole contour rounded. There'll be a lot more scale like if I can get that radius in there.
Day 2 ends. The end of the great cowling carving. Talk about a long day. We'll come back and work on this tomorrow. Now, one of the things, actually it's the next thing I have to do now that I'm satisfied with this today, may not even get to do it today, since today is Thanksgiving, in case anybody didn't know. One of the things I learned from the Miss Ashley project is how critical it is in the case. Now, I improvised how I wanted to take this, and I don't know that other people have done that. I'm sure Paul Walker's system is very similar, and Kaz, most of the Europeans. We haven't invented anything here. This is just, we're trying to take the best features of everybody's take-apart system. But one of the things I realized was in plugging in the stab, having this access hole where the horn was, it really got to be where there's problems where it wants to rub on formers and things. And I finally got this to where I'm happy with it. Now, because the tail is going to be the same thickness, I want to make a pretty good mirror image of. I want to copy this exact dimension, because I realize this little gap is a significant thing in a take-apart airplane. If it's too far forward, it's difficult to, well, it's hard to explain. You can't get at the horn. And if it's too far back, it gets to be a problem. It wants to rub on things. So I found that by lining this up just past where the horn exits, in fact, maybe I'll even add another 1/8 of an inch of dimension to it, it gives me my best shot. Now, it just happens that what I did, I already have a former in there, so I'm going to make another former inside before I actually cut this, so I have this dimension, and then save this little tail piece. Because if you line this up, you can see it's going to come off right about the last form. And this then I will save as a piece when I make the little piece that has the rudder on it. And that was one of the biggest things I learned from the Miss Ashley project. Coming up with, when you're making a carbon fuselage, that the way it comes apart, adding the extra bolt, I found was very significant. And because we've had such good luck with the carbon fuselage, I don't want to get, there's a thing, I don't want to fix it if it isn't broke. And it's really important that I figure out exactly how I want to do the cowl hold down. The cowl hold down on this is a little bit different. You can see it's just something I have to improvise. One of the few parts that I was not happy with was this type of cowl hold down. It went into a blind nut. I'm going to use solid carbon fiber blocks this year, I think. Hopefully going to use them anyway. So anyway, having said that, I want to go through the mail because, guys, it is Thanksgiving Day, and I really don't want to work on a plane today. Now, one of our many new subscribers this year is Jim Plaskin. Jim has graciously donated this book, after looking at some of the preview videos. Donated this book, letting us borrow it for a few months. Jim, don't depend on getting it back right away. I will definitely go through this, and one of the things that I really enjoy doing is looking at books on an extended basis and going back to them 3 or 4 times. But this is one of the better ones. There are photos in this book of the later development Tempest that I had never even seen. This one, for one, with the, look at the size of that scoop. Look about a scoop with the 5-bladed prop. But to me, doing the research on these projects before they actually come to fruition, this to me is one of the most enjoyable parts of doing any semi-scale model. And you can't do this if you're building a Cardinal or a Nobler or something. This is only appropriate when you're actually aggressively trying to make a plane look like its scale counterpart. For anybody that went through the Seafire and the Spitfire series with me when we were molding those carbon fiber 5-bladed props, well, you know how much work went into that project. Looks like some of these variants even had counter-rotating props. See, this is the stuff you learn. And if you're not interested in it, if you're just interested in building a standard stunner, well, there's no downside to it, but it's enjoyable to have this. And just some of the photos that
I mean, there's only so many photos of these planes in the world. There aren't millions and millions, and you just can't go back and get them because a lot of these planes don't exist anymore. So it's the kind of thing you have to cherish. Just one of the unusual paint jobs here. I wish I knew what color this was. Again, a good rendition of what we're trying to do with this plug in the past week or so is get this plug to look something like that, and yet still be a stunt ship. Things you don't realize is like the first time you stand by a Corsair, you don't realize how big it is. Look at how big a Typhoon, how large it is relative to a man. It's a very large, at least according to what I see in the pictures, a large aeroplane. Another interesting view kind of from the bottom, seeing how the gear doors fold in. There's times I really wish I was building a scale model. In some ways it would be, well, not a lot of ways, but it would be easier to make a totally scale model. You could measure it, photo enlarge it, and build it. But this, we have to kind of stretch it, Gumbyeize it. And of course it has to be built light enough that it's going to be, you know, competitive, I hope, to some level. Now, one of the features that I like about most British planes is they're usually very curved, and usually almost all of them have some variation of invasion, stripes, and camo. I find that really attractive. Take a close look at this picture and see if you can figure out what they're doing. It took me half an hour to figure out. These are the fuel tanks, these are the engine mounts. Just imagine a world. Look at these engines, 24-cylinder engines. From these, from the pictures, we'll be able to get a really good rendition of the ink lines. It looks like Gerald Champ sitting in the canopy of his Typhoon here. Anyway, Gerald, don't forget, we still have your Mustang fuselage upstairs. We haven't put it to good use yet, but that doesn't mean we won't. Now I can imagine if this project works out the way I want it to, hopefully will, not only having this, but having that Zetron working. It's just going to make for a fun year. It's probably going to be the best year ever. I hope so. And if it works out, we'll be able to retrofit a lot of our other planes with the Zetron. There's even some nice artwork in this book. Jim, this is an excellent book, by the way. Really, thanks a whole lot. So if by now, if you're not psyched up about Typhoons, well, hey, there's not much I can do about it. But if you are, hey, join me for the rest of this video series on what I hope is going to be a great adventure. And the adventure of a lifetime is always, when you don't know where you're going, it's a real adventure. If you know where you're going, it's not really an adventure. And we plan on going into uncharted water, possibly where not many other people, or maybe nobody has gone before. And I wouldn't even discount the fact that at some point in time we could even make a simulated radiator like this to fit inside that. So boy, did it take a long time to do that plug. Whew. But in the end, you have something that wasn't there before. Look at the nose art on some of these Typhoons. A great book, again. I'm overwhelmed. And some really good detailing so we can get a real accurate rendition of the canopy. Very similar, in fact, to a Seafire canopy. Not exactly, but very similar. Has the same sliding rails that a Seafire canopy has. The unusual paint jobs of what was one of the prototypes. That rudder is a real, I think that's a very attractive rudder, kind of like a like an SB6 kind of, a Tucker Special. And of course the Sato 4-stroke. I'm just going to read this real quick. The 1-ton monster, the Napier Sabre engine. 1-ton monster, they called it. Look at the way those cylinders mount. And again, as I've said a million times before, if you're interested in a Typhoon, I'll gladly share all my documentation with anybody that's really interested. And please feel free to share whatever you have with me. We'll keep track of it. and I'm sure you'll get it back in good condition. And special thanks to Jim, and I hope you're really going to enjoy being on board for this whole series of tapes, Jim. Before we end the tape, and we're almost near the end anyway, this is from a good friend of mine, Larry Laird. Larry sent a little set of pictures here for me to enjoy, and with some special news. One of the little secret projects he's working on is a P38 with two 4-stroke Sato 30s. Hey, Ken Clapson, eat your heart out. Larry enjoys a lot of other aspects of the hobby, including RC. They're just some of his Air Force. And I see from the pictures that he loves 4-strokes. Hey, Larry, we can't hate you for that. Look at this one real close. This has a Sato twin. Sato twin. But Larry, I'd like to know more about how that motor runs. How much it weighs and what it sounds like. Imagine that in Augie's Cub. By the way, when I got to fly Augie's Cub, boy, just the first thing I ever thought of was, boy, a Sato twin would be cool. For anybody who might not understand, I used to fly RC. I still enjoy RC. I really am looking forward to going with Sergio down to one of the indoor meets they're going to have here real soon. Maybe shooting a little video. I'm very interested in all the things. Made it my life saying that there's room in a hobby for everybody. There's certainly room for Typhoons and certainly room for Cubs with Sato twins, room for jets, room for 4-strokes, room for everybody. That's the way it should be. One of the other special things about the video is that we can share our lives together. Parts of our lives that we'd never be able to share with a 35mm camera or in some other way. And I want to share this Thanksgiving with everybody. My family will be here later today. We're going to have a giant celebration. Karen has spent probably a whole week. How long did you spend doing this? About a week?
No, 3 days.
This is her concourse table. Actually, she won't tell you, but she's put a lot of effort into this. And we're trying to celebrate this, share it with our friends. It's Thanksgiving 2000, and I really think we all have a lot to be thankful for. We all have a lot just living in this country, just living in this time, just having Typhoons and having Zetrons and having 4-strokes and having, I don't know what else we have, but having a wonderful family, having our health, and as probably most of you know, my mom has not been in good health, but we're certainly hoping that she'll be having a great time with us on this Thanksgiving. It's a special Thanksgiving for our family, and we certainly make sure that we never forget how lucky we are and how many things we have to be thankful for. And we're always happy to share those blessings with everybody we can. So hope you've enjoyed the video. We're going to continue this set tomorrow and get down there and do some more work. But for right now, it's a great Thanksgiving, a great time to be alive, and we really have a lot to look forward to. If this is the first video of Windy's that you've ever seen, hey, please feel free to pass it around to all your friends. Share it with everybody. The part of this that I enjoy the most, and I feel privileged to be able to do it, is to share what I've learned and encourage other people to share it also. And I think in doing that, it gives my life a special meaning, and it makes for just more fun for everybody. Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next tape.